which you are also much aware of this Unnat Bharat Abhiyan activity. This is the first time like we are taking a step toward understanding the villages through this webinar. I would like to inform you that in this webinar we have a participant from across the country, almost like 10 to 15% would be there today, and also from the northeastern state. Some are from Nagaland, are from Manipur, Mizoram are also there. So I'm very happy that the active participant from throughout the country, and especially beloved northeastern states. I'm very much grateful that they are there. Excuse me, today my throat is a little bit ache. So let me introduce you also about this entire journey of 4 day. Madam, day one we have the renowned um, TV news anchor and also a social change, uh, and then followed by the next is from the finance metrics, and then thereafter the a social change maker, Dr. Saini. And madam, today today we are here to also understand about the psychology and about the social aspect of the society from you. And also let me tell you, this entire setup has been to build in order to get a team of students, a team of interested people who would like to enter into the village and who would like to understand how can the social obligation of an individual can be fulfilled. Because as far as our understanding, or everybody knew about that, every individual has got a certain perspective or certain understanding and certain social responsibilities toward the our structure, our societal structure. That's why in this 1 week long webinar we will be looking after those interested, the gradient or the battery of people that would like to associate with us to this Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, and also the Smart Village Lab. The lab would be the Smart Village Lab has been, as I informed, it's in University of Melbourne brainchild by Dr. Hemanta Dole, who is in that university. So, and he is rooted in Assam, especially in this upper Assam. Probably is in Majuli, no, Jorhat. So that's why we were having one project some time ago in Majuli also. So now let me also inform you that we have a very active participant from the Tamil Nadu, who every now and then guide us as not only as a participant but also as an the driver of this session. Today we are having now 60 around, so but technically we would have more than that. So let's wait a couple of minutes, maybe 1 minute, madam, if it's all right.
It's absolutely fine, Mr. Rogha.
Yes, madam. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
So, participant, I would like to, thank to all of you who are here, and also would like to request your colleague and your friend, your student, maybe, please inform them that they should join immediately. Since we are like, looking for around 60 plus, because 100 was the, on average, followed every day. Today, Vishwakarma Puja, I can understand, some of you may be very much occupied, but nevertheless, who can spare the time, or please inform them to join immediately. So in 1 minute, we are going to start our session. So see, I think we are now 11:05. So I think we can do the introduction of our speaker to all the participants. May I request Padmini to come forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's do it, because ma'am may be occupied and she may have to go. We cannot make so much delay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so yeah,
Okay,
please start the introduction. Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir. A beautiful Thursday morning to one and all present here. Respected Dr. Namami Sharma ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of Social Work, Tezpur University. Respected Dr. Medelson Ronghang sir, Coordinator of Smart Village Lab and Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. Respected faculty members of all the distinguished colleges and dear esteemed participants. I, Padmini, on behalf of entire BBEC family, would like to welcome you all to the fourth day of our online workshop cum seminar, Smart Villages by Intervention and Visible Solution. This workshop is jointly organized by Smart Village Lab, local chapter, Bineshwar Brahma Engineering College, Kokrajhar, and University of Melbourne, Australia, under the umbrella of Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. In India, there are more than 6 lakh villages, and among that, many villages are still deprived from the basic needs of life. This workshop cum seminar is just a small step towards making a change by developing those rural areas and making them smart. Today, we are very fortunate enough that we have among us Dr. Namami Sharma ma'am, who is currently teaching in the Department of Social Work, Tezpur University. Prior to teaching, she was working in rural Madhya Pradesh and Uttarakhand. She worked with various communities and tribes native to these two states on issues pertaining to nature conservation, traditional knowledge system, and forest rights. Her research is mainly ecological issues, community-based institution, and resource governance. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and joining us in the meeting. We are very grateful to you and we are blessed to have you and to learn a bucket full of knowledge from you. Thank you, ma'am, for giving your valuable time to us. And lastly, I would also like to wish everyone a very happy Vishwakumar Puja and had a very happy Mahalaya. Without any further delay, I request ma'am to continue the session. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Padmini, for the generous introduction. And thank you, Dr. Ronghang, also for the warm welcome. And I'm actually, I feel very fortunate to be a part of this workshop because it has, come at times when we have been deliberating or we have been discussing, on things which are related to rural India, especially in the context of this current pandemic times. So can I just share my presentation? Can I share screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Hilal.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
I
Ma'am.
think,
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
ma'am. You can share the screen.
yes. Is it
Yeah, it's visible,
Is it
madam.
visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, it's visible. Okay, so, all of us are in very trying times in these days of pandemic. And a couple of months back, we have, gone through this harrowing tales of migrants who were coming back from their place to the place of work to their native towns, and very distressing and very, difficult times which were witnessed by them. So, many a times I'm sure a lot of us have thought that what has led so much of, distress migration taking place in this country. And we can come out with just one answer, is that maybe our villages or our rural settings are not able to give them enough employment opportunities, or not able to sustain a livelihood for a good quality of life, that they have to go outside far away from their hometowns to seek livelihood. So, we have been so in between, there are a lot of articles which has been written in local newspapers and also national newspapers about the state of India's villages in terms of, its sustenance or its livelihood status. So in that context, I'm saying that this workshop is very well placed, because people from different parts of the country and different parts of globe, because we have University of Melbourne, who is actually spearheading this project, coming together to talk about smart villages. So in this context, I'd like to today talk about the role of community-based institutions, which I had worked with in different contexts, in different mostly in the states of Madhya Pradesh and Uttarakhand, and what could be its role in visualizing a smart village. So so without much delay, so I just straight go into the topic. Actually, I went through the schedule and I saw that the group has been, exposed to some very interesting topics like microfinance and leadership, and also orientation towards the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan itself, and its significance. So in this backdrop, I think the role of community-based institution, this presentation would make sense. But nonetheless, if the participants have any question or any doubts here, please feel free to type it in the chat box and we can attend to that later. When I went through the website of the Smart Village Lab, which you have, and the logo which says culture, construction, capacity, and community. So I found that tagline under the logo very interesting, and it actually, brings together construction, also embedded in the said culture and community, and also talks about building capacities of the community. So here where it is here, where we talk about the role of the institutions. So let's go ahead. When we think of a village, right, this is a picture of a village in Assam. This village, this house structure is a typical, the bhoral, the granary which you can see is a typical of a Garo granary, Garo tribe. And this village is very close to where I stay, near Tezpur University, and the village is called Sengeli Mari Garo Gaon. And this village, when we went to the village, it really fitted into the idea or the romantic image of a picturesque village, which is very, beautiful, scenic, very calm, quiet, away from the hustle bustle of the normal urban life, and where people sit together, laugh together, work together. They have this strong community feeling, So this really fitted into all the poems and all the fiction that we might have read about villages. So we are very impressed with the way the village functioned. So, when you talk about the village, these are the certain things which are attuned to rural life. One is the collective spirit. The second is the togetherness. The people come together to celebrate certain festivals. So if it is the state festival of Bihu, it's not about erecting a pandal and going there to watch the function where a lot of money has been pumped in. It's just getting together and singing and dancing and merrymaking. So it's that togetherness that they celebrate every day. The minimalist life, which is very attractive, when you are in the village, in such a village, you don't remember the malls or the attractions of a city life. It's very serene, and you sometimes wonder that why am I not getting the urge to buy a new thing or do some online shopping? You don't get such thoughts. Such is the village life. And also you see their livelihoods are based on natural resources, mostly farming and other livestock rearing. So you don't have like a typical 9-to-5 job where you are given certain deliverables and you are always stressed and you have a fixed period of time that you have to, accomplish certain tasks. So this is the idea of a village which we have in mind when you think. So when you're talking about a smart village, when you're talking about technology, when you're talking about, modern technology getting infused in a village to make it developed, or somewhere, bringing it at par with all the facilities that we usually find in an urban center, and making things easier or for the people in the village, and making things accessible for the people in the village, we must always keep in mind that our technological intervention should not dilute these very things that we, think of when we again visualize a village. The collective spirit, the togetherness, minimalism, it shouldn't dilute or it shouldn't pollute the very spirit of a rural settlement, of a village. So recently, I'm sure you must have heard about it. I came across this documentary which has been recently released in Netflix, which is called The Social Dilemma, which is specifically targeting the social networks, of course, the other side, the flip side of social networks. When it was introduced, people didn't have any other bad intention. People just wanted individuals to come together, and it has accomplished a lot of things in that vein. But nonetheless, there is a flip side of it, and the documentary has very beautifully was able to show that. So that was specific to social network, of course. I mean, we cannot make a generalized statement. But nonetheless, the point here I'm trying to make is that technology often makes people very individualistic, right? And individualistic is something which is again in contrast to the collective spirit that I'm talking about, which is always associated with the village, which makes a village very different from the kind of urban self-centered situation that we find ourselves in. So that is the point I'm trying to make, that technology, when you talk about smart village, we have to always keep in mind to conserve or preserve this collective spirit, that social capital in a village. We should always have that in mind, so that, you know, plan our intervention or strategies in such a way that these things are preserved. And how do we do that? So one way to do that is to work on community-based institutions. So we'll go further into it and look at what community-based institutions are. We'll also share certain case studies where, you know, we'll see how community-based institutions have really helped in sustaining a technology. And we'll see how you can, the steps of how to go about it. So going to the next slide. So here is a picture. Of course, I have taken it from an open source on the internet. This is a biogas. This is you know, a representative picture of a biogas. But the story that I'm going to share is very real, and I personally had witnessed it in in Uttarakhand. So the place in Uttarakhand that I have witnessed this is Ranikhet. I'm sure all of you have heard about it. It's in the district Almora, and it's in Himalayan district. So there, I was working in this organization called Pan Himalayan Grassroots Development Foundation. That was an NGO which was working in that area. So what happened is, you know, there were, during early 2000, around 2005-06, there were a lot of organizations and projects which were talking about energy conservation. So biogas was considered to be one such intervention which can help in, you know, conserving forest, because you will not need fuel wood, and it also was projected as something which will help in producing manure in the form of slurry. So biogas, the input of biogas is all the biodegradable waste material, as in vegetable peels and your bio waste, and most importantly, the cow dung, the dung of the livestock, you know, which goes into the biogas, and under pressure, bacterial formation takes place, and then the gas is produced. The gas can be used for cooking purpose, and it has been used to generate electricity also in some cases, but not in that particular project that I'm talking about. And also there is an outlet for the slurry I'm sure all of you know about it. That slurry is a liquid form which comes out of it and which can be used as a manure for the agricultural field. Now, the thing is that biogas, this particular village that I'm talking about, had around 20 households. This hill villages, mountain villages are not very populated. So 20 households, and we had a meeting in the 20 households, and we said that there's this biogas, but there's only one biogas. We're going to set up for the entire community. And of course, all these 20 households, you are all related to one another. It's like one big family. So I'm sure you'll be able to manage it. So we will just, place it in such a way in the center of the habitation. And what you have to do is you will have to come and contribute in the form of this biodegradable waste and cow dung. Okay, you'll have to contribute, and you'll have to keep filling the dome, the structure, and then whatever is the output, the gas and the manure, you'll have to share it amongst yourself. Okay, because this is a community-driven biogas project. We just left it at that. People are very happy because we gave a very good presentation saying that, see, this will help you conserve your forest. Women would no longer go into the forest to, cut fuel wood, and in the hills, this LPG cylinder was of great scarcity in those days. So people were very insecure about the LPG cylinders, right? And it used to take days to, reach the town, or the LPG cylinder van to reach the village. So they were very excited about the prospect of having a gas stove, and not having to go to the forest every second day to cut or collect firewood. And also we tried to tell them that if you use a gas stove, there will be the smoke there will be no smoke, so it will be good for your health as well and your eyes as well. So people were very excited. So there were happy faces all around. But what happened is, as I told you, I left it at that. We left it at that. We didn't talk about how the community people will, manage this biogas. Who will come every day? Who will maintain it? who out of those 20 households, who will do what task. We just thought that they have an understanding and they will manage, because they seem to be relatives, you know, belonging to a one big family, and assume things. And we came from a very you know, urban school, and we tried to impose an idea without really understanding the community that we are working with. Then what happened is, after a couple of months, the biogas became non-functional. It became defunct, because biogas is something which requires, you know, a lot of maintenance. It requires maintenance and continuous maintenance. And eventually these 20 households, they started saying that they didn't take any ownership of the project. They were you know, shirking their responsibility. Because it's some amount of work is involved. And again, when it came to benefit sharing, sharing the slurry or sharing the gas, for instance, laying down the pipelines, because houses were at different distance from the biogas, nobody wanted to invest, because this entire structure was made by the money which came in the project. So it was almost like some kind of a charity. Of course, the community members gave some labor in contribution. So there was no ownership. This thing became an orphan. The biogas structure became an orphan, and it lay defunct. And then eventually people, after a couple of months, they went back to their original state. And so the biogas became sad. So this is what happens, you know. So a lot of money was put into it. And this is the case of one such structures. There were several others. And in each case, whenever you have this top-down approach, you know, you have an idea, you have a project, you have the money, you go into the community, and without involving the community, you almost tend to say that, here, see, we have this project, and this is what is going to do, and we give a very hunky-dory romantic picture, and then we move away, right? And then after that, in the follow-up, we realized that, okay, there is no ownership. So there's something goes wrong, the people would call you and say that, oh, this has gone wrong, please come and mend it. But there's no ownership, there's no accountability. So it just laid there and it's dysfunctional. So that was the plight of lot of biogas structures which were made during those days in Uttarakhand. So the success stories were very less. The success stories came from only those households which had a private ownership, because of course you have that ownership, you own it, you have invested money in it. So this is where, you know, we, under this backdrop, will talk about the importance of community-based institution while managing and, you know, governing a new technology. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this story is a positive story, right? And it's a very, very recent story. So what happened is this, there was this initiative initiative on climate smart agriculture, right? So climate smart agriculture, this initiative was taken in a couple of districts in three states, if I'm not wrong, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh. But here, this is the story of Betul district in Madhya Pradesh. This, I have read it on an internet-based blog, and this was very popularized also. You can find it on the internet. So what I found interesting about this entire story is the role of the community-based institution in making one alien concept success, you know. So there's this project on climate smart agriculture, which was funded by this funding agency called USAID. And this project aimed to build resilience amongst the farming communities through a range of climate smart activities. Now, when this project representatives, project managers, let's say, you know, went into the village in the Betul district, they found the women. The men were busy in work, so they found the women and they held a series of meetings with the women. Now, what did they do in their meeting? They did not come like we did, you know, in 2000, that this is a biogas and this is a new technology and this is going to do, you know, so on and so forth to your community. They did nothing of that. They came and they just had a meeting and they told the women that you share your experience as a farmer, you know. So the women started sharing. Of course, they were involved in the farming activities. So they started sharing their experiences. They started saying that, the kind of, then gradually the discussion moved on towards climate change. So the women said that, there have been erratic rainfall and there is no irrigation. So they were dependent on rains for the agriculture was rain fed. So now with the change in climate and seasons and gradually which is happening, the ponds are drying up. So they're finding it really difficult. So these are the challenges. So the problems were there, but the presentation of the problems, the project managers helped them do it. So usually you have a problem, we have especially in India, we have the, tendency to blame the government. See, the pond has dried up, the government is not doing anything, this is not doing anything. But though we are intelligent, we fail to, give a rationale to why this is happening. And maybe when we look into the rationale, the action that we are, committing are directly responsible for the dry pond in my village. So, as an external member, which all of us would be perhaps, we would have to facilitate the community members to come to that realization, to think critically of the situation that they are in and try to rationalize why they are in that situation. So in this case, the project managers went to them and they started saying that, yeah, this climate, because of the erratic climate, our farming has taken agriculture production has taken a toll. So then what happened is, then this project manager said that, okay, then let's do one thing. Let's come together and let's plan what we can do. So in those following meetings, they discussed, what could be done. These women came together and they discussed what activities could be done. But before coming to the activities, the project people, they very smartly, they formed an institution, which is called the Gram Jalvayu Committee. And Gram Jalvayu Committee, in English, they have termed it as VCMC, Village Climate Management Committee. And the novelty of this committee was all the members in this committee were women. Now, when I look at these points, these are the steps which this project followed, while forming this institution. So the series of meetings that I am saying would come under consultation. So they term it as a consultative meetings, with the village women. So in these meetings, they also got to know about the traditional farming practices that the villagers were doing. So of course, the traditional knowledge system also gets recorded. Then of course, the institution is formed. And after forming the institution, they had to evolve certain bylaws, which we failed to do in that biogas implementation, remember? So in the bylaws, they decided from very simple things that who would be members of this committee. There would be a general body, there would be an executive body. Then executive body, there would be a president, there would be a secretary, right? And what would be the tenure of these positions? What would be the role of these positions, right? And then they started planning the activities. So the village had several hamlets. So there were representatives from all hamlets. So this, as an external member, we should see to it that the village institution is democratic and it has members, representatives from all the sections in the society, in the village. So there was a Dalit hamlet, let's say, or there was a minority Muslim hamlet, let's say. We must have representatives from those hamlets also. Like this is, I'm generally mentioning that. But in this village, there's more or less people belonging to the same community, so they came together. Then they started evolving the bylaws, Like for example, for climate smart agriculture, suppose there's one activity of let's say of biofencing. So they would have to take care of grazing. So these certain rules of how to, who would make that, who would make the biofencing and who would guard the biofencing. They had certain rules inscribed in their bylaws that, okay, by turn wise, every household will do it, or we will appoint someone and will collect money and give money to that person, so on and so forth. So there were certain bylaws for governing their resources. Then they started planning the activities. They started, as of now, they haven't executed it as far as the reports I have seen, but the plan is to execute those activities, to monitor the activities, And after that, this is one committee in one village in Betul district. So similarly, they would form several other such committees in other districts and eventually form a federation of all the committees of women who would talk about climate smart agriculture. Now the thing is, here you see the external member, the project, project managers who went there to initiate the discussion, they are external members, they are not part of the community. So they would move out. 3 years project over, they will go away. It is these people who will have to stay with the activities that had been implemented in the village. So if they are not involved, then who will govern these initiatives, right? So in this particular project, the community members were involved right from the beginning. So they have this immense ownership and immense sense of belongingness to the project. So which actually, would help in the sustenance of the project. Now we go to the real, definition, like what is community-based institution? So usually the term which is used is, it's the umbrella term of community-based organization, but I would prefer using the term institution because here we are talking about formal institutions, right? When we say formal institutions, I'm not referring to institutions which are, necessarily registered or necessarily have a formal recognition. Not necessarily, it may have eventually, but all that is required is the institution needs to have a clear-cut constitution, which we call the bylaws, a clear-cut constitution as to who are the members, who will be the leaders, how will we elect the leaders, till what time will the leaders be, what will be the roles and responsibility of the members, the interest of the institution. So interest as in, we cannot have a very loosely framed interest map out, So if it's a specific technology which is being initiated in the village, so the interest and the role of the institution should be as clearly mapped out, how they will function in what way. So we'll talk about another case study where we'll see how this three things had worked very beautifully. As I had spoken in the earlier slide, that sustainability factor, so you introduce a technology, a beautiful technology, but the most importance of having community-based institution is the sustainability of the technology. No matter how modern a technology is, if there is no ownership from the people for which you had introduced it to, there won't be a sustenance of that particular intervention. The third is very important, the leadership and optimal institution designs, which also becomes a part of the constitution. So where, you are the committee members, because we have seen a lot of conflict arising out of community-based institution based on this, on the leadership. Because invariably when the institution becomes robust, there are people with self-interest and powerful people in the village who would want to come and assume the role of leadership. So one has to be, the villagers, the community members will have to be very aware and conscious of such things. So at the very beginning, the constitution has to be robust, has to be very, well thought out to address such challenges. Because we know Indian villages have a lot of these social groups, and it has class, it has caste, it has gender issues. So to address all of that, and it has different power dynamics. So to address all of that, our constitution, the bylaws has to be very intricate and well thought out. So people take like several months to come up with bylaws. So once the bylaws in the institution are set, then the institution is good enough for several years to go. So I personally had witnessed such institutions in the state of Orissa, where community-based institutions were involved in forest governance, and they had done it beautifully. They were responsible for bringing up hectares of forest all on their own and conserving and preserving it, and very democratically and harmoniously, because lot of investment has been done in framing that community-based institutions constitution, the bylaws, the rules, the regulations. Yes, and the rules and regulations also include rewards and sanctions. Suppose someone does something good, so how would you reward that person? Suppose you said that the institution takes a decision that no one is allowed to cut tree in my forest, but someone goes and cuts it. What would be the punishment? What would be the sanction? So those things are also included in the institution. Of course, it will differ from context to context, because depending on the resource around which you have made the institution. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, this is another case study which I wanted to share with you. This photograph is not very representative, but I had just taken it from the website. I'm sure all of you must have heard of the organization called Pradhan. It's a national level organization, but this particular case story is from Chhattisgarh, the state of Chhattisgarh, district Bastar. Bastar has often, I'm sure you must have all heard about Bastar. It has keeps coming to news for all the wrong reasons, because mostly of the Maoist infested problem. But otherwise, Bastar had very interesting, communities and who are living harmoniously with nature in the district of Bastar. A lot of native tribes, with very interesting traditional ecological knowledge will be able to find there. So one such tribe is called Bison Horn Maria tribe. So this tribe is found only in the states of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and this tribe has very small land holdings who are new to settled agriculture. And they were mostly, the case where I'm talking about, sorry, is in Kelor Gram Panchayat. So what happened is, in 2016, there were like 22 women. They were part of 2 SHGs. They were having their regular meetings, and some people from representatives from Pradhan also happened to attend those meetings, and they realized that again and again this problem of low income was coming. They are not able to, and the only source of livelihood was farming, agriculture. They also earned some money in working as farm laborers in nearby villages. Now, they were finding it difficult to earn money because after the Kharif season, like after the summers, there is no water. There's no water, and they do not have any irrigation facility. Otherwise, they could have cultivated some vegetables. Now, Pradhan had faced a similar situation a couple of years back in another state, in the adjacent state of Jharkhand, where it used to work in 2 main districts, Gumla and I think another, I'm forgetting the name, Birbhum, I think, or Singhbhum district, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, so these 2 districts, Pradhan was working, and there they faced a similar situation. What they did is they set up some lift irrigation pumps. And these lift irrigation pumps had helped a great deal to the tribals in Jharkhand to earn money through second crop in the year. So what the Pradhan representatives did is they presented this idea to the people, to the women in this particular village, this Kelor Gram Panchayat. And the women said, yes, we can also do it. If you can set up irrigation pumps, we can easily, cultivate vegetables, and we'll be very happy to do it, because the demand for vegetables in the nearby towns and villages are very high. So we'll be happy to do it. Now the thing is, there's no electricity in that particular Gram Panchayat. So you need electricity for the pump to be able to lift water. So at that time, there was a scheme called Saur Sujala scheme, and Chhattisgarh Renewable Energy Development Agency, CREDA. CREDA was offering full subsidies on solar pumps and solar plates, full subsidy. There's an application fees of ₹10,000, that was it. Now, you see that this Pradhan could have said that, okay, we'll pay the 10,000 rupees, you go ahead. But no, Pradhan said that you mobilize this 10,000 rupees to instill that sense of ownership, So the people, but the only thing is CREDA would give the subsidy not to a group, it would give to a single individual. So they had one individual involved, and they collected the money, they took a loan from the SHG and collected the money, they paid the fees and registered this individual's name with strict regulations that I'm saying bylaws, right? With strict regulation, that though it is in your name, an agreement has to be signed that the water will be used by all of us. Now the main issue came, the irrigation, the lift irrigation system will be set up. The plates were also laid. CREDA helped them to lay the plates and the entire solar system. But the thing is, the issue came as to how do we lay the pipes, because the houses were located away from one another. So the length of the pipes were different, right? And there were a lot of money which was required to lay the pipes. So around 60,000 rupees were required, which they again, Pradhan said that you mobilize. So they took loan from this National Rural Livelihood Mission village organizations. They were village organizations which were running in the tune of, in the model of SHG. So they took a loan from them, and about 60,000. Pradhan also gave them money, but in the form of a loan, of course, minimal interest or no interest almost. And 14 SHGs, self-help groups, were involved. They laid, this is a picture where a woman is seen, you know, laying the pipes, and people came together and they gave community labor. And so this entire exercise, this process actually brought the villagers very close to one another. And after a while, the pipes were laid, everything was set. Now the thing came about governance. The technology is there, everything is there. Now who will govern it, right? So water committee was formed. Now almost everyone, every member in the household in the village was member of this water committee. So within the water committee, they had some bylaws. Who would be the president, who would be the secretary, and they also included a charge. So every household will have to pay rupees 40 per month towards using this water, you know, in their respective fields. And they maintained the separate cash register for that 40 rupees to come in. Now at this point, after 2-3 years, every household has an additional income, as per the report, of 15,000 to 20,000 per season, you know, and they started doing 3 crops a year. So if they hadn't formed that institution, or if they hadn't, you know, included the community in the entire process, this technology would also be lying in a no man's land, and it would have, you know, gone through the plight of what generally common property resource goes through, you know, the tragedy of commons. Nobody wants to own it. So it is very, very important to give shape or to give recognition to a common property. These are common property resource, and a community-based institution can only be able to do that. Next is, yes, so all this, while through the case studies, I was just trying to highlight, you know, the importance of community-based institution. So, okay, I'm sure all of you have got an idea of what I was trying to say. Basically, the main things from my own experience, I would say that, you know, a community-based institution helps in a participatory approach. Generally, when you talk about a new technology, it should never be top down, right? We all agree to that. It has to be democratic. It has to be bottom up. The thing should come from them. But we also always assume, we tend to assume that people who are living in rural areas would not have much of an exposure or an idea about the new technology that is coming out. Nonetheless, the technology might be new, but the reason for which we are applying the technology is for their benefit. That reason is not new to them, and the reason should come from them. They should say that this is the problem we are facing, so maybe is this the technology that will give us a solution? That realization of that reason is something which we as external members should facilitate. And in this entire thing, there should be a participation. So community-based institution, when you work through community-based institution and not through individuals, the participation is there in decision-making. Otherwise, when you work through individuals, then what happens is we contribute in creating new power structures in the village. We take a path which is in contrast to the democratic processes. We choose a path which is in contrast to what Gandhi ji spoke about when he talked about, you know, Gram Swaraj, or his vision about villages. So this is one thing. One is participation. Second is, of course, as I said in the case studies also you have witnessed, that they have a certain ownership and belonging. It's because right from day one, they involve. So they say it's our project, it's our thing. So they will get involved, they'll have that ownership, and they will know the nitty-gritties of how to run the technology, and overall a process of empowerment that you are doing. Governance of resources, which will of course lead to the sustainability of the technology. And the fourth one, which is very important, is scope for vulnerable groups to participate. So when you talk about this community-based institution, suppose we are not talking about institution building, and we said that we'll have a meeting, general village meeting, and we'll call everyone, and we'll take a decision that will take care of participation decision making, that will take care of ownership, that will take care of governance. So job is done. We don't need to particularly create an institution. But what happens is, we know that in the village, there, as I said, there are so many, dynamics, social dynamics, cultural dynamics. So as an external member, I really do not know who are the vulnerable group. I need to assess. Okay, suppose I know that we have done a initial mapping, and I know that there are a couple of lower caste households which are there in the periphery of the village, or there are these women who are always under wheel and they do not speak much. So we know that these are certain, vulnerable groups which are in there. So we call for a village meeting, everybody comes, and we make sure that this lower caste household also participates in the meeting, and we make sure that the women also participate. Oh, Didi, please aa jaiye. We go extra mile to include the women. But when we initiate the meeting, it's only this powerful lot who will start speaking. So you have the participation of, let's say, 100 people on paper, but in reality, there is no participation. There is no democratic decision making. So when you have a community-based institution, when you do it strategically, and when you have these bylaws and rules, when you talk about equal representation, you give a scope, and it's a process. It's not a one-time thing, So it's a process, and as I said, that when you involve the community in the process, there is a scope for these vulnerable groups to participate in the true sense of the term, to actually come together, right? So I'll give you a very small example. This is again a real story. I came across this in Maharashtra, Ahmednagar, where there was once a severe drought which had broken down, and then there's this organization which was working in health related issues. So there was drought and there was no food in the community, but it's a very highly casteist community. So the higher caste would never interact with the Dalit households, the lower caste households. So what the organization did is they called everyone to their campus and said that it was the story of one particular village, around 54 families. They said that you come and we will give you residence, but we'll make sure that you will have to share the same space. Now there was problem with the caste groups. The higher caste did not want to stay with the lower caste. So on one hand, you can say that, okay, this is the culture, let's go with the culture. But what the organization did is, because it was planning to work there for a long period of time, so what they did is they said, we don't have a choice, you'll have to share the dormitory, and otherwise you are out, you will have to go out. So finally they shared, and of course there was some antagonism. Eventually, sorry, what happened was, while staying in that campus, they started playing certain games, and they started engaging them in some processes in the organization campus. It's a huge campus, and in the process they facilitate the intermingling of the different groups. And eventually, when they formed a community-based institution, this particular stay, which they had earlier not anticipated or not planned for particularly, this cohabitation of these groups helped in making the community-based institution very robust. And that was one village which actually diluted caste relationship over like 10 years, and eventually saw a woman Dalit Panchayat Pradhan. They elected, not in a reserved seat, but in an open seat, they elected a woman Dalit member, So this is what I'm saying, that these vulnerable groups also get a scope, a platform to participate, which otherwise they would not get in traditional institutions like you have the Khap Panchayat, or you have some other traditional institution, or even for that matter, the village Panchayat, They do not get a scope to really, come up with their ideas. Also women, for that matter. Now we come to the stages of forming a community-based institution. So one, we have to remember that no matter how mythical it sounds, but participation is the core, is the spine of a community-based institution. So the first step is when we generally go to a village and we ourselves, we have to be first convinced about the importance of a community-based institution. So you might go there and see that there are already several community-based institutions. There would be SHG, there would be the village panchayat is also a sort of a formal community-based institution. There will be a lot of informal groups, youth groups, and so on. But despite that, maybe if there are SHGs, we can bring together the SHG and work on a robust community-based institution, or work on an existing institution and try to give shape to it. So you can do either of it instead of erecting a new structure all of a sudden. And you can help fine-tune or reorganize the existing institutions. So while reorganizing, generally what we think is, when we go to a village with a particular intervention, we have deadlines in our head and we want to accomplish the task. So all these background work of involving the people and, investing and talking, it seems like a waste of time, but it is not. It is going to lay the very foundation of the project. And one should, when in deciding the timeline, one should dedicate several hours, or several hours, I'm saying, sorry, several months to address this process. So, so much so that the investment should be so much so that the need to have a community institution should come from the people of the village. Like it happened in that, in the case which I shared about the climate smart agriculture. They themselves said that, yes, let's get together. We have a problem with climate change, so let's have a group together. So that need to have a CBI, if comes from the community, it's the best. Participatory selection of members. So here, when I say participatory, there is a high probability of people choosing their favorites or choosing their people who belong to their own family or own caste group. So here, as an external member, you have to be sensitive to their the taboos and to their biases, but at the same time also allow them to see that this is not going to work in that way. Everybody would have different interest groups. Evolving bylaws, the rules and sanctions, which is very, very important for the longevity of the institution itself. And these bylaws can be revised from time to time. Then need assessment and planning, of course, with respect to the specific technological intervention that we are going to do, whether that technology is required or not. If it is required, to what regard, in what aspect and to what end. So those things, it shouldn't be in the mind of the person who is initiating the project or the program, but should also be realized by the community members. Execution should be involved. It requires a lot of time. There's been, I have seen projects, which are funded by NABARD, and NABARD insists upon community contribution and community labor, and it's a Herculean task to bring people together to work for a common good. In today's day and age, in rural India also, it is very difficult. So this would require a considerable amount of investment in the form of an institution. Some villages, there's a natural, cohesiveness that is easy, and these are true in many tribal villages. But generally in caste-based villages, it is difficult. From my limited experience, what I have seen. Of course, the institution will be involved in monitoring and evaluation. Last but not the least, linkages with other institutions, that is important. So community-based institution will not be like a frog in the well. It will interact with other institutions, formal and informal. It will interact with civil society organization. It will interact with NGOs. It will interact with financial organizations, so on and so forth. So it will, over the period of time, over let's say 15, 20 years, when the village becomes smart, the people also become very empowered. So smart village should go hand in hand with, I will refrain from using the word smart people, but conscious, conscientized people who can think critically. This is a photo image which I again downloaded from an internet open source. So this is just to depict the kind of issues, challenges one might face in a village. So in this image, the father is saying, meaning of motherland, son, the land which is your mother's to work and your father to own. So this is a very typical representative of how gender biasness or prejudices has worked in our country. So when you're talking about this could be a challenge. So when you're talking about community-based institution, what I have seen is most successful community-based institutions are mostly women-centric. I'm not saying that men-centric CBIs do not work, but women-centric, it serves the dual purpose. It serves the purpose of empowering the women as well, and also their participation in arenas which are traditionally thought to be the man's world. A woman also participates in agriculture, maybe more than a man, but when it comes to decision making as to what crop to be cultivated, a woman is usually not consulted. So in this way, the CBIs based out of women work. The next, see, this is again a typical image of caste-based discrimination. So one should take care of this. It is. I do not have like one universal rule, because it differs from place to place, context to context. In that case, I can suggest you may read certain case studies where people have worked towards, have an inclusive community-based institution. Again, land grabbing issues like this, where there would be one landlord with huge swaths of land ownership, and will have workers working on it. And so these kind of dynamics would be there in a village, this power center. So one very important point what I'd like to stress is, when we make community-based institution, if we do not invest in ourselves understanding the community as a first step, we might actually contribute in erecting power structures or giving more power to the existing power structures. Usually what happens is when you go to the village, people do not come out to talk. So you tend to talk to people who are confident, who will automatically welcome you. And those are the people usually what we see are the rich lot. So, and then we feel comfortable and we carry on with them. So this is what I have seen in my brief, engagement in working with the grassroots. So this is a carelessness from the side of the people who would go to implement. So you have to understand and internalize the village and understand the dynamics from a very objective point of view without getting embroiled in it. And then existence of multiple institutions, as I have said, one of the challenges. So instead of erecting a new institution, you might want to empower an existing institution also. Existing stratas, caste, class, gender, you'll have to take into account. This could be a challenge otherwise. One very important challenge is the non-recognition of this community-based institution. So community-based institution, when suppose you make some bhava, there is a community-based institution which is very close to a village near our university. It's called Baha Farming Group. So this Baha Farming Group, they formed a group. This Baha means flower in the Adivasi language, and they went to a bank and said that we are a Baha Farming Group, we want a loan. And the bank said, what Baha Farming? So there is no recognition because they have not registered. So how do you, so in that case, perhaps a different strategy also might have to be adopted. Not necessarily registration, but to popularize that, yes, at a policy level, to recognize this informal community-based institutions as well. Leadership, again, because usually what happens, when you say democratically elect a leader, if you ask the people who do you want to elect a leader, they will talk about someone who is already a powerful person, who is already a leader. But he might have his own selfish interest, and he might not be representative or inclusive of all the stratas that are there in the village. So what we can do is, this we had done once in Rajasthan. We decided to have small meetings in all the, with all the groups, all the vulnerable groups separately, and take a consensus, and then have a village level meeting to choose the leader. So you have a sense also who would be a leader, who go out of the way and take ownership of the entire institution and be inclusive at the same time. Capital generation and utilization, of course, how to source in funds, how to mobilize funds. So a very easy way is to just give it, but that doesn't work. So no matter how long it takes, one should insist that the community-based institution mobilizes funds by itself, and we should just facilitate the CBIs to utilize it or manage the fund strategically and manage it well. That is all. So these are the challenges which perhaps, one can put a brain in and just think it through, how to, come out with an effective solution based on the context that he or she is working in. But these are the general challenges which I have written down based on the CBIs that I have come across. So that is all. Thank you very much. So I think it's 12 o'clock, I guess. And I think I have not surpassed the time that is given to me. Over to you, Dr. Ronghang.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, madam. It was very good, very informative, and your experience in Uttarakhand is really very awesome. I was thinking, like in our northeastern state, was some part are like hilly. For example, like we have a participant from Nagaland, so maybe they can take up. Yeah, they can take up that. Like for example, in here, so that maybe a little bit expensive affair because of the topographical. I think you utilize the ground morphology accordingly, right? Because I can see the it was connected with the how you call it, home, that sewerage system, and also to the feeding from the cow dung and then home, so those things are there. I think that's very much essential to understand the topology and to make them effective project or effective user. So participant, you are requested to please put your question to madam, or you can just use a chat box so that it can be answered if there is anything. Yeah, please.
Yes, I'll be very happy to take any question if you have. And I'll be very happy to take any comment also, actually, if you have, or any such cases which you might have come across, because northeastern states, we have actually, Dr. Ronghang, what I have seen is in northeastern states, we have very robust community-based institutions already, the traditional community-based institutions, especially in Nagaland, you have the village committees, and we have in Arunachal Pradesh also. In a lot of 6 scheduled areas also we have. So if we can come up with such examples from the participant side, then it will add on to the discussion, I guess. Yes.
Very true, Dr. Sharma. This is true. And you talk about this, so community based, and the formation of different structure is really very important. Various community, like water community. I think that bit where it empower and also the ownership.
Yes.
Of that project. So that's very. So is any question? If not much question, madam, they are just appreciating your presentation and your talk. I think you can see there.
Yes. What I would like to, say, as a concluding point is, so when you talk about technology or development, mostly when you talk about development also, the kind of development, the policy we are following is mostly borrowed from the Western model of development. So without taking into consideration what actually is needed in the places where we are working at. So when you're talking about technology and smart village, so it is very important, that is the point I'd like to reiterate, to invest equal amount of time and effort in building these community institutions also, so that the ownership and sustainability of the technology is there.
Yes.
So that is the crux of the entire presentation. That is the point I wanted to make. Yes.
Yes, madam. Very true, madam.
Yes, there is a question, I guess.
Yes. You can read it if you can. Yeah.
Caste-based discrimination is prevalent even in our today's society. Okay, so in a village with how will they work together as a community? Yes. So in a village with high caste and low caste, this is a question which is it's a very relevant but very difficult to answer as well. See, as I said, that there are several case studies which have presented. Tried to present an inclusive community-based institution. Like, for example, basically at one level, the discrimination of caste is embedded in the culture that the people are following, like the rituals and the purity and pollution, etc. At another level, it is also associated with the use of the resources. So at the second level, I'll just give you an example. There was one village in Andhra Pradesh where there was a stream, and the watershed of the stream was there was a stream, and these people, the village development committee, they decided to have they were planning activities to be placed under MG Narega. And while planning that, they very categorically had proposed wells which are close to the fields of the upper caste people, right? And the lower caste were already in the periphery, and the land they had were further periphery, further to the edge of the village, and were away from the water source. So what happened was the external agency, because it was implemented by the panchayat, they said, okay, fine, and the panchayat members had power centers. So they said, this is going to go. But the agency which was working there, the name of the organization is FES, Foundation for Ecological Security. This is something which I have read actually, a paper was written on it. And FES decided to do it the other way. They decided to make channels or connecting the water source to the fields of the Dalits. And as a result of which the fields of the Dalits were irrigated, and the kind of income that was generated by those fields were also not equivalent, but had risen relatively as compared to the past. And gradually the Dalits also started speaking up. It created a lot of conflict between the two caste groups, because earlier the lower caste people, they were not speaking out and they were being suppressed constantly. They started speaking out and they started demanding a position in the village level institution. They started standing for elections in an open seat and so on and so forth. They started mobilizing. And over a period of 10 years, not exactly 10 years, I think 7 to 8 years, if you go to the village, of course, I will not say that it has diluted, but it had reduced to a large degree and extent. And the paper which I had read, I had met the people also who had worked in that village. They said that it mainly that village plan which they made, where they decided to make those wells closer to the Dalit fields and make those channels closer to the directing the stream water to the Dalit fields, was actually a game changer, according to them. So it is difficult, because every context, it's the caste dynamics is at a different level. So in Maharashtra, if you say the caste dynamics, if you compare it to a caste dynamics in a village in Assam, the treatment or the way you would address it would be different. So at one go, it will be difficult for me to say that this is like the ground rule or an universal rule. But of course, with more brainstorming, perhaps we can come up with new ways. But what I would like to reiterate, I think it is Virya Setu who has asked a question, no? So when we go to the village, when we do a need assessment, we should identify the different caste groups and do it separately. The entire process of bringing the community, while building the community-based institution, we should do it separately so that we have an idea about what each one of them think. So if you have one village meeting where everybody comes, we'll never get to know what the lower caste or the other vulnerable groups think about. So that is one thing. Yes. People's participation, Nagarajan. People's participation mainly depends on their name and fame earning behavior. How to change such mentality? Yes. So people's participation, you mean to say you are referring maybe to the people who come and in the name of participation just talks about things which is more related to their selfish interest. Am I right? I mean, have I understood your question clearly? If I'm not wrong, I'll just go by what I have understood.
Yes, madam.
Yes,
yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Have I understood it correctly, right? Yes. So what happens is, so when if there's a selfish interest, when a person would participate and be very vocal in a meeting just to, come across as someone who is very interested, such mentality cannot be changed, but such mentality needs to be recognized. So once you know that this person is, that background also plays a role. And also, as I said, that you'll have multiple meetings with different groups in the village, right? So you'd automatically know where this man is coming from. So recognizing such behavior is more important than, what do you say? Then changing the mentality, it's not in our hand. Overall, I mean, it's a long process. Maybe he changes, not changes. We cannot take that in our hand. But recognizing and be very aware of that person coming in and trying to, change the course of your process is very important. I hope I have answered your question, Nagarajanji.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Yes.
But such persons only dominate the communities.
Yes. Such person
so
dominates.
So we are still in the underdeveloped state.
Correct, Nagarajan ji. I'll just share quickly, you know, one incident where this we were doing some village planning exercise in Rajasthan, and there we had this large village Gram Sabha, and we are supposed to make a village plan, and we started doing a problem analysis, you know, what are the causes, what are the problems that you're facing, and everybody was saying that our farmlands are suffering, we don't have water, we don't have irrigation, so on, and they were women. And there we saw that there were only 2-3 people who were dominating the entire discussion. And then they took us to I said, which are the sites? We had done some community mapping also. We said, which are the sites that would be good for the wells, the, you know, infiltration tanks they were making, you know, for the tanks. So they took us to their land, and then we had this cadastral maps you have, no, where you have the land mapped out, the revenue land mapped out. So we came and we superimposed those community maps on the cadastral map, and we realized that, you know, the land which these 3-4 guys had taken us to were their own land. Of course, you know, and they didn't tell us that in the meeting. So we cross-checked, and then we went back and we had multiple meetings with different groups. We had a meeting separately with the women also. And you know what was the main problem that the women had cited? In the larger group, they didn't say. When we met them separately, they said, you know, madam, the main problem that we are facing right now is that, this is way back in 2007, is that we do not have toilets. We do not have toilets in our village. So we all have to go out in the open, and open defecation is there. And due to open defecation, there's a lot of other issues also which are coming up. And the men would never say this because it is not particularly their problem. So you please take care of. Then open defecation, they also said another thing. Said when we go for the open defecation in the morning, that's the only time we get to socialize with one another. So we do not want household toilets, we want community toilets. You're getting it? So as a you know, community organizer or a person who is coming out with a plan, if we come out with, say that, okay, we'll give toilets, that we have this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, we'll have these individual toilets. They said, and these individual toilets, if you make it in Uttarakhand, I had seen a lot of people have started using it to tie their goats and store grains and all of that. So these women very categorically said that no, we want a separate, but we also want a space to socialize and hang around with, and we want a nice bathing space and everything very enclosed and all. So this is something which we gathered, and then we told them that you have to speak like this in the larger meeting, and in the larger meeting, eventually they came and said that the men also agreed. So what I'm trying to say is a little bit of effort maybe, but in your mind, it should be there constantly that in one meeting, we are not going to get any crux of what is actually going on in the village. In one visit, we are not going to get. We have to constantly keep engaging and to understand, to get the vein of the community. So that is one thing.
Okay, madam.
Yes, madam.
Necessity is the mother of invention, at the same time implementation. The people
Yes.
collectively felt their necessity, so
Yes,
that
yes.
only they achieved it. So people have to feel.
Yes, Nagarajan ji, you're very correct. People have to feel. Kalyani is asking, have you ever faced that women felt unsafe working in such conditions in villages? You know, honestly telling you, Kalyani, I had felt more unsafe working in the urban areas. In villages, till now, by God's grace, I have not felt unsafe. But again, but I have friends who had felt unsafe in certain parts of the country. I shouldn't say where, but then in certain communities, they did feel unsafe. But the places where I had worked in Uttarakhand, in Madhya Pradesh, in Chhattisgarh, I have had the experience of attending meetings till 1 o'clock in the night, being a only woman, and with men who had their traditional drinks in their hands and discussing very passionately about forest governance. So I never felt so, but I will not say that it's not, I was lucky maybe. And the kind of communities, the tribal communities are very open, and you feel mostly comfortable that way. I haven't worked in, I do not have the experience in working with North India part, you know, like Haryana, UP and Bihar. And so, but I have friends who had faced certain challenges in working in those villages as well. So yeah, I mean, that is a very tricky part. We'll have to understand the situation and take necessary precautions. Yes. But often what I felt, Kalyani, that they do not, being a woman, sometimes the men do not tend to take you seriously. So when you come and talk about agriculture to a group of men, they will not take you seriously. So that also may be a reason because of which I was steered more to working with women. But then gradually, when they see that okay, there are something that is coming out of it, they will accommodate gradually. So that is how it happened. Yeah. Someone had raised a hand, I saw.
Yeah, and it was due raise, so it was not, I think accidentally he raised, or I don't know. It's not
Okay,
there.
okay.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, so you have patiently answered all the queries from our participants. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Rahman.
you. So we didn't see it anymore. So anyhow, I'm sure that the takeaway would be there out of these 69 people to now at present at the end of the session also. So like Vardes Virasto is from Nagaland. So probably the Xavier's college. So probably he can also make some kind of communication with madam, and of course to us also, if you are really interested to make our village stronger, more empowered. So thank you for asking that question. And also Nagarajan,
Yes, yes.
as I told that Nagarajan is very active, and he is also guiding us in this to steer the program, to take the program forward. So thank you so much for your time, and in spite of your tight schedule, you are here, and thank you so much, man.
No, it was a
Thank-
pleasure. It was a pleasure,
Madam,
Dr. Ronghan. Thank you for having us. Yes, someone is saying
Madam,
something.
Madam,
Yes.
kindly share your presentation, madam, please.
Yes, I
It
will
is
share
very
it
nice.
with Dr. Yes, I'll share it with Dr. Ronghang and perhaps and Padmini, and they can perhaps share it with you. Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks a lot,
yes.
madam.
Yes.
Yeah, for all the participants, we are going to share all this, and also the video is recorded, so we'll share the recording also. Yes, thank you so
Yes.
much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. So all the participants requested to please fill the feedback form, and also please join to the afternoon session. So see you in the afternoon. And thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Padmini. Thank you. Bye bye.